Food Service Power Plant Network. Happy Wednesday evening, everybody. It's 6 p.m. Mountain. You know what time it is. Our favorite time of the week where we get a conversation with an industry leader, someone who's done really cool things and who's willing to be open and honest to share them with all of us to listen and learn and ask questions. And it's going to be amazing. Tonight is one of our coolest conversations. I don't think that's an understatement. We've got Louise O'Sullivan joining us. So many incredible accomplishments in her history. We're going to go through them together tonight. NAFEM just renamed their President's Award, the Louise O'Sullivan Award of Excellence. So, which is how I got to know Louise and learn about her. So it's going to be a really special night. A couple of things for you to remember. Okay, first, if someone, here's what I'm going to show you. Someone is first in tonight. Congratulations on that. If you want us to see your name, if you could go to StreamYard/Facebook, type in your name, and then we'll see who's commenting. I'm also going to be looking down on my phone to see if I can see, and we'll try to acknowledge people. Another question, I'll try to bring you up. Oh, here we go. Josh Callahan must have done it because what's up, Josh? We can see his name. You are welcome to send love to Louise. And here we go. Kathy's in the house. Yay, Louise. Oh, so stinking fun. You are welcome to ask questions of Louise. If you've got a question that comes up along the way as you're listening to her talk and share, and you want to know something, type it in. I'm going to do my best to see everything and I'll pull it up and, you'll get to ask things of her yourself. So I think that's it. Let me go find her. Louise.
Jason.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm really, really wonderful. It is such a gift. Let me just say thank you for giving us an hour or so of your time. We are so, so glad that you chose to join us tonight.
I'm delighted to be here.
Oh, good. We'll have a blast. Okay, so we've got friends. Kevin, I appreciate the compliment. I dressed up for Louise. I did. Louise, sometimes I wear like t-shirts and I'm kind of like, I was like, you know what, for Louise, I'm bringing the duds tonight. I'm going to bring the collar shirt.
You look good, Jason.
Well, thanks. You look amazing. I love it. Rob Connolly's in the house. Boom. Fist bump, Rob. This is awesome. Sending love. Sending love right back. Tom is stoked. Gosh, this is going to be really fun. Okay. I'm just going to make sure that I can see people on my phone to see who is here. If I can, we'll see if I can find it. But I want to be able to acknowledge people if I can as it comes up. Boom. Okay, got it. Deirdre. That's D. Hi, D. Good to see you. Oh, this is awesome. Okay, so Louise, there are so many in the industry who know you, who call you friend, who call you mentor, who have followed your story, and there are people who don't. So can you give, for those who don't know your story and background and food service career, can you just fill us in on your journey in the industry?
Yes. But before I do that, though, Jason, I want to just thank you for what you do. I can't imagine anybody as capable as you to be able to hold this audience on Wednesday nights. And we continue to come back because of your connection that you give to us and the wisdom you impart. So I just want to thank you.
Thanks, Louise. I love it. Thanks.
So my career, I started out as a school teacher. I taught third grade and loved it, absolutely loved it. But back in those days, when you got pregnant, you couldn't teach anymore full time. You had to be a substitute teacher. Crazy, absolutely. So I not only went from being a teacher in my classroom, loving it and loving my students, to leaving 2 days later, coming back to that same classroom as a substitute. Difference was I made $25 a day.
Yeah.
So I decided maybe this wasn't going to be the career for me as far as lifestyle went. Yeah. And so I had an uncle who had an ad agency, and he was trying to get Groen as his account. Okay. And Groen told him, we don't need an ad agency. We need a writer. Do you have one? So he asked me, I had done a little bit of writing for him, if I would go in and interview. I did, and it was the greatest thing ever. They wanted somebody to write case histories about actual users of Groen equipment and testimonials. And interviews were on the phone, and you had to find a local photographer who would go out and take a photograph of the user with the equipment, and then write the story, put it together, and it was $70 a story. I thought I had hit the jackpot. I could stay home with my kids and, make all this money. Well, after I did about 50 stories, which were so much fun, they said, that's enough. Maybe you should hold on with the stories and come in 2 days a week. So I started in 1975 as a part-time advertising writer, and pretty quickly got more and more interested in what was going on in the business world, even though I still kept since I was part-time, my substitute teaching gig. And I became Eastern sales manager. It was very exciting. I traveled with reps. It was really wonderful. And after that, director of marketing and sales. Then I was vice president of sales and marketing. And then in 1984, vice president of sales, marketing, and engineering. And then 85, I was made president of Growing. So it was about 9.5 years later.
Wow, what a journey.
And then I was president there for 12 years before leaving.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so your journey didn't totally end there, obviously. So you were president of Growing for 12 years. And then what was the next phase of your journey?
Well, beyond that, I started a buying group called Prime Advantage. It was an industrial manufacturing buying group. And we went one step back, if you would, in the channel of what was typical buying groups in food service at the time. There were dealer buying groups, many of them, but there were no manufacturer buying groups where our suppliers were the suppliers and we were the members. So we started that in 1997, and I sold it in 2017 to a larger buying group and stayed on for a year as a consultant, and now I'm retired.
Oh, what an awesome journey. So many questions. Okay, when you're sort of, can you hear me okay, by the way? Is there any feedback? Great. Okay. Someone's saying, pleasure to see you both. Glad to be able to meet you through my awesome mentor, Michelle Wiebel. So happy for the award named after you. Well-deserved. Cheers, guys. Oh, I love it.
Michelle.
Oh, heck yes. That was Joe. That was Joe.
That was Joe talking about Michelle.
Yeah, who works. Tina is saying, wow, so inspiring. I love it. Let's see. Who else? Ben is on. Rob Connolly. Josh is loving the conversation. So great. Okay, so you're known for a lot of firsts, Louise. There are a lot of things. I think Deirdre said, and something, you were ahead of your time. You're a trendsetter. Talk about when you became the president of Growing and you were chosen that role. You'd worked your way up from marketing, advertising, et cetera. What was the industry like at that time? How did your coworkers respond when you became the president of Growing?
Well, that's a great question. The industry was wonderful. I got, you can imagine, letters and flowers and calls because I had been out in the field since 78 and now this was 85. The industry was just so welcoming for me as president. But the second part of your question, the coworkers, nobody's ever asked me this. So this was an interesting scenario. In 1981, when I was made vice president of sales and marketing, the then president of Growing, his name was Lou Burns, had always made known that he wanted to go up in Dover. Okay. And he said to me and to the VP of manufacturing, one of you two is going to have my job. Well, I do not recommend that style of management in hindsight, because although we had mutual respect for each other, we were deadhead competitors for this job, and it kind of became grudging mutual respect.
Yeah.
So it gets closer to, we don't know exactly when it's going to happen. We don't know when Lou's going to be promoted. And so we each have our fans inside the company. But one thing that was going on the year before I was made president is we had opened a plant in Jackson, Mississippi, brand new, and union negotiations with the steelworkers had started for the contract that expired in August of 85. Well, rapid forward, it's now 85. I get promoted to president of Growing. my VP of manufacturing competitor gets promoted to another Dover company as president, upstate New York, a smaller company. That's the good news. The bad news. And listen, if I get into the weeds, Jason, you do that. So that I
You're
know.
great, Louise.
Otherwise, Deidre or maybe Maureen Slocum could just type some Z's in the two fantastic women. Anyhow, he gets promoted to this small company in upstate New York, and he ends up also putting his resume out on the street, and Dover finds it.
Oh, wow.
So he loses that job. Okay, fast forward now. I wish him goodbye. Good luck. I'm the president. And the contract comes up. I get the letter in the mail. They refused the contract and they went on strike. I've been a president now for 2 months. So I say to Dover, oh my gosh, I wasn't even involved in the negotiations. I was on the sales side. I don't know what's going on. And they said, oh, you have a strike. You better take care of it. Because Dover hired presidents or promoted presidents who would run the companies as if they owned them. And there were only 20 people on the Dover staff then, $5 billion company, 45 different manufacturing companies that they owned. And they told us, handle it. So that's a long answer to how did my coworkers respond. I got lots of calls from the guys on the shop floor saying, this isn't personal. We didn't do this to you. But so my first 6 weeks plus, the strike went 6 weeks. And those 6 weeks, I spent more time on the shop floor than I've ever spent. I used to take tours and bring customers, and they loved me. I was the sales guy with the orders until I was the president. The average wage in Groen was $13.65 an hour, and the plant in Jackson, Mississippi was $6.75 an hour. So the writing was on the wall that there were going to be some challenges. And it also didn't help that there were big 50-gallon drums because the roof leaked and it had never gotten fixed. So the first thing I did was fix the roof, spend time on the shop floor. Strike ended in 6 weeks, and I won over the coworkers that were not on my team. But one more point, there was a third group. You mentioned the industry and you mentioned the coworkers, but there was a third group of industry people who weren't not in food service, but I would go to business meetings like YPO or things like that. I'd have my name, Louise O'Sullivan, Groen. And this is how the business community reacted. They would say, oh, what do you do at Groen? And I would say, I'm the president. And they would say, the what? And I would say, the president. And they would say, oh, family-owned company, huh?
Wow.
And I would say, well, not really. We're a public company, and we're owned by the Dover Corporation. And, the company's 80 years old, and I'm the 4th president. And they'd be, really? So that's the 3 reactions to my becoming president.
Wow. It's great. If anyone could negotiate a contract with grace and strength, it's Louise. That's Deirdre. I love it. I mean, Louise, I think there's so many lessons in how you solved that challenge. I would say you're not afraid to get your hands dirty, but you weren't getting your hands dirty. You were simply building relationships and trust with every facet of Dover at the time, right?
Absolutely. And this was a real test. Brand new president, and they're saying, handle it. And I'm thinking, God, my career could be over a lot faster than I ever thought it would be. But I spent tons of time asking, what were the challenges? I knew there was the Jackson threat. I knew they thought we were going to close the factory, which they never did on my watch. But I really wanted to know what were the issues. So I spent time with the guys on the floor. And it was the craziest thing. It was a mix of legitimate, this was supposed to happen, like that happens in every company, slights that were never intended. But there were some real other strange things. I remember this one for sure. This is a long time ago, but the guy said to me, I go on my break for 10 minutes and the supervisor comes in and watches me and times me. And I'm horrified. I said, Harry, when did that happen? He said 3 years ago, but still it was awful. So there was a lot of that also. So it was spending time with the people, having them understand what my vision was for the company, and really most of everything was listening. And that's, and let me not leave this out. I also, through my YPO contacts, found a consultant who had worked with steelworkers before on finalizing contracts. And he gave me a lot of advice, gave the management team advice. We worked with him. So it wasn't, I mean, I could have never done it without him.
Well, we talk all the time about the people we surround ourselves with and finding coaches and people that have expertise. And
right.
I call that wisdom. So inspiring and courageous, Marcia says. This is awesome. Our buddy Charlie from NAFEM. Charlie, great question. Louise, who did you learn from or turn to for your inspiration?
I guess it has to go back, Charlie, to my dad. I started working for my dad, and I mean, I know you might mean in the present day, but for my dad when I was 12, I worked in the parts department. He was an automobile dealer. He owned a Lincoln Mercury dealership. And I worked in the parts department, sending out postcards telling people it's time to bring your car in. But I watched my dad. He was the world's greatest salesman. There wasn't a person, he didn't know anybody that he didn't like. He loved everybody. And it was amazing to see that side of him. But I also watched him lose the dealership. He was a great salesman, not such a great accountant, and didn't recognize that the entries that were going in maybe were not always profitable. And after a few years, I think it was 6 years, the Ford Motor Credit Company came and took the dealership back. So it was an amazing lesson for a 12 to 16-year-old in what could happen in the world and how my dad handled it. And so he was my example and my inspiration always. Later, I had a lot of people who I really looked up to. There weren't too many women role models, but I was always a good listener. I felt that was a part of something. And so I was inspired by a whole lot of great people in food service.
Oh, thanks for sharing that story. We learn the good and the bad. We're always paying attention, and sometimes we learn things we want to emulate, and sometimes we learn things we want to avoid. Charlie, thanks for the question. Okay, Louise, you were, I think it was Kathy who said, she's not merely a trendsetter, she blazed a trail. So, blazing a trail, getting off the beaten path, being a pioneer in something, the first female president of Adobe Corporation, the first female president of NAFEM, et cetera. Did you know at the time, did you look back and see yourself as a pioneer, as all the things we look back on and think of you of today? Were you thinking of that in the moment?
Never. I never thought of myself as a pioneer. I always thought of myself as amazingly lucky to get the opportunities that I got. And then as soon as I realized how lucky I was, I would also realize how I never wanted to disappoint anybody. I had this, horrible fear of letting somebody down who had trusted me or had expectations that I could handle something. And so, I think I realized early on, I've said this many times, a woman in business, especially in a male-dominated industry, has to work twice as hard to get accepted. And a woman, back then I got asked twice as many questions when I would call on a dealer. They'd start asking me all these technical questions about growing equipment, which was really interesting because from writing all those case histories, 50 to 60 case histories, I not only knew the technical part, I knew the sizzle. And not everybody knew the sizzle. I knew why I had a guy tell me that a Groen cooker mixer saved his marriage because he made these enormous batches of spaghetti sauce, and he was a restaurant owner, and he used to get up in the middle of the night to stir it. And he got an automated, this is one of the case histories I wrote. So I knew the sizzle, but I still got questioned twice as much as a male counterpart. But there's a plus to that story. If you answer the questions right, you get remembered twice as long.
Wow, great comment. That's Marcia's loving it. You're right. I think if you know how to answer them, you win a lot of trust. If you answer people honestly. Who is this? I don't know who this is. Louise has been. Oh, Maureen is on. Louise has been my role model, as she has been for many other women and men. It's I love that oftentimes people accomplish great things not knowing in the moment necessarily what they're doing. And you said something. You said you lived with a fear of letting people down. One of my questions that I was thinking of as you were talking, when we look at people who've accomplished really cool things and who so many people call a mentor and we looked up to and exude confidence, it's easy to think that there wasn't fear, that taking courageous steps and doing big things, some people think courage is the absence of fear. I tend to think it's choosing to do something when it's right, even when there's fear. Did you experience a fair amount of fear along the way?
All the time. There were, and I have to say, clearly I have confidence, and I had confidence once I felt strong, and I was constantly teaching. We hired lots of strong women at Grow, and probably the one pioneering thing I did, I hired a beautiful woman named Elaine Cheney as a dietitian. She was such a good salesperson that I promoted her to VP of Sales. She was the first Black female vice president of sales at Dover. And that was kind of pioneering. She always told me that had I seen her college graduation picture, I wouldn't have hired her. And I would say, Elaine, why not? She said, that was her picture. But anyhow, that was the one pioneering thing. But talking about confidence and living with fear, I remember giving lots of speeches. I was invited many places, one as president of NAFEM, the other on boards that I was on. And there were times, most of the time, that I was nervous before a speech, even if it was a speech about growing and I knew it backwards and forwards. And the times that I wasn't nervous, I didn't do as well. And I mean, I don't know if that's a phenomenon, but I was nervous before tonight. You know that.
You're doing great, by the way. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Okay, tell us, in terms of pioneering, doing things first sometimes, what is the joy of being a visionary and a pioneer? And consequently, what's the burden? There's both. We have the yin and yang to everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, clearly the joy is just the joy of being a pioneer is being with all the colleagues, friends, the love that this industry shares, just so much opportunity for friends to become family. That's the joy. And that's what's happened in this industry for sure with so many of us. But the feeling of accomplishment of doing something that's not been done before, of building those four personalities. In the four personalities, I'm a driver. And so the satisfaction I get from building something and seeing it come to fruition and having the team be inspired enough to make things far beyond I ever thought of doing happen, that's probably the joy. The burden of being first is just so maddening. I remember when my first trip with a rep was scheduled, and I was the Eastern sales manager at the time, and the rep, the VP of sales, Lou Burns, told me, you got to go here. Well, there was, between the VP of sales and myself, there was another gentleman whose last name was the family name. And he was not so thrilled for me to be in the field. And he said, I won't name the name of the rep, but he said, so-and-so doesn't want you to come in the field. He's married and his wife doesn't think it's a good idea for you to travel together. And my response was, I get my own room, don't I? I mean, what is he possibly talking about? But just sitting back and thinking about, how could that happen? This is business. I'm new to business, but this is business. So being a pioneer had its burdens. I remember sitting in front of a dealer with a rep. The rep and I got along great, and the dealer literally said to me, this is a big Boston dealer sitting. He was in his chair, and there was a picture of his dad behind him, and he said, you have a family? I said, oh, yes, I have young children. And he said, why aren't you home with them? Just like that. And I said, because somebody's got to feed the coffers. I mean, it was just, and then we went on and everything was fine. But some of the pioneer thing, we don't have time for all the stories. There's 100 stories. that were where I was the first woman, but it was an unconscious bias. I don't think anybody felt negative so strongly about it. It just came out.
Wow. I can't imagine any of those things obviously happening today or those comments today. I mean, how far we've come in 35 years, however long that's been. You mentioned your family. I think there's a perception, I've heard a perception from a lot of female colleagues over time that it's hard to be a successful business person and do what we do. And by the way, my bride is loving it. This is the best. Oh, love it. This is so many of us can relate to that feeling. Who is this? This is, Rachel Weaver. Hi, Rachel. So many of us can relate to that feeling. Thank you for sharing. Oh gosh, heck yes. Charlie, Louise earned the nickname, the mother of all CFSP. Love to know what inspired her to start the CFSP program. Great question, Charlie. We might as well, it was on our list, but let's go there. Charlie got it. So, my boss, Josh, actually just joined the NAFEM board, and he's going to become CFSP certified. And I said, well, did you know that Louise, who's on tonight, is a big part of the reason you're going to be doing this? So what was the inspiration? That's a great question, Charlie. What was the inspiration for you behind that program?
Well, I was on the NAFEM board, and my committee was the NAFEM Education Committee. And the crazy thing was we were very interested in the education part of NAFEM. FIDA had an education program. It was connected with Purdue. It was very sophisticated. And NAFEM people could attend, but there was no true education program for NAFEM. So my committee said, let's get all the things that really NAFEM people need to understand, from sales and marketing to technology to research, et cetera, to finance. How can we become a resource for education? And as a side, let's give anybody who gets education, let's get them some recognition. Let's start the Certified Food Service Professional program, and let's have levels, and let's have pins, and let's have rings. But that wasn't our original big focus. Our real big focus was to have these classes. We hired a trainer named Reg Farrell. He was a good old boy from Texas. Everybody hired him, all the manufacturers. He did a great job. One company would tell another company. And we also created a test, and the test had to do with all the facets of food service. Each of us on the committee wrote a chapter of the test. I wrote the STEAM chapter with much help from Russ Bean and others in my company, not by myself. And so we put the book together for the test because we felt you had to be in order to be a true professional, you had to have some education, but you had to know the field you were in, even if it wasn't the one you were selling. And so that's how the CFSP got started. And the exciting thing for everybody is the actual recognition side of it took off much faster. And we had that business lounge at the NAFEM show. That's also was a perk of being a CFSP. And it became really it's today, meeting rooms. But that name that Charlie called me, I was at the door to get into the business lounge, and I didn't have my badge on. And one of the NAFEM staffers were there, and one of the people that was just hired to let people in and out said, "I'm sorry, you don't have your CFSP pin on." And I said, "Oh, I can't believe it." And Patty Urell said, "Oh, come on, she's the mother of CFSP. Let her in."
Oh, I love it. What a great story. So you got in, I'm assuming.
I got it, yes.
The mother gets in. That's awesome. This is so great. Who is this? Danny Monet is on. What's up, brother? Fascinating stories. Thanks for sharing, Jason and Louise. Danny, we're glad you are here, my friend. People are loving this. Oh, Charlie's he's having some fun at home right now. This is so great. Okay, we were talking about family and how to people who think, women who think it's hard to be a professional and it doesn't just have to be women, frankly. There's a lot of people who want to have a family and they want to be successful professional and they don't know how the two go together. I think particularly women, it's probably stronger thought amongst women. And how many kids do you have? Do you have 5?
Well, my husband and I have a blended family. I have 2, he has 3.
Okay.
My late husband.
But you did it. A successful business career. I assume you've got a wonderful family. I think we were talking earlier, you're all still connected and you all still see each other. What advice or what would you say to people who wonder if that's possible? How'd you do it?
Well, it wasn't easy. That's the first thing I'll say. So anybody who says it's easy, of course, everybody knows that's not the case. I was very fortunate in that my son was the first grandson, and both in-laws, my parents and the in-laws, were available to sit. And so even when I was a brand new mom substitute teaching, I could drop my little baby off at my mom's in the morning and my mother-in-law would go pick him up in the afternoon. And so the support of the family was fantastic. But two other things that I want to mention. When my kids became 12, 13, I did with them what my dad did with me. I brought them to growing. Christmas vacations, Easter vacations, and summer vacations, they worked there. And it didn't relieve the working mother guilt. That's with you forever. To this day, I still have it. But it did bring them into the atmosphere of my life. They saw a different me, just like I had seen a different dad, got some respect. They didn't love the job. They both had jobs in the factory, and it was more like, boy, I'm staying in college now that I know what this is like, which is what all summer jobs for teenagers are good for. But I had a lot of support from family, and lucky to have that.
Oh, I love that. I love that you brought your kids in because, Louise, when I was a kid, I was cleaning, growing combis in my dad's test kitchen.
Good for you. Good for you. Well, I can remember this is like a milestone day for me on working mother guilt, that one day I was sick. My kids came home from high school and they didn't know I had taken a sick day. And they both said to me, they were 17 months apart. They both said to me, "What are you doing here?" I said, "Well, I didn't feel well and I thought I'd be here when you came home." They said, "This is our time to be alone with nobody to tell us what to do." And I thought, okay, maybe it's not so bad that I'm at work when they come home.
Go back to work, Mom.
Right, exactly.
Kathy, great question. What is one piece of advice you wish you had been given earlier in your career?
That's a great question. Probably don't sweat the small stuff. Is that too much of a cliche? I mean, I don't think I'm a micromanager, but now I think I spent too much time worrying about what people thought or what, I really wish early on that I knew better to go with my gut.
I think I still do that. And I think it does change over time. I think once you get perspective, you've seen things that really do affect or that create turbulent waters and things that go away quickly. You're able to move past those little things quicker, I believe.
And an interest, it sort of allies with that. I often have had people say to me, "What would you do differently?" And it's right on the tip of my tongue. Every time somebody says it, I say hiring. I wish I had known then what I know. I wish I had known at Grown what I learned about at Prime Advantage about culture of your company, the kind of people you hire, understanding personalities and what roles fit best with what types of personalities. We did a lot of study and education when we started Prime Advantage because we were a small company and we could do that. And I wish I had learned much earlier about culture and had some advice on hiring back then.
Great point.
Because I made some big mistakes.
Well, don't we all, right? Don't we all? You mentioned confidence earlier. And did you know as a kid when you were, I don't know, Kyle, you're getting your teaching degree, you're growing up, did you know that you were destined to accomplish big things? Was your confidence always fairly high?
I think I was a confident little kid, but I'm going to tell you what gave me. I went to Catholic school all my life, 8 years grade school, 8 years of all female high school and college Catholic school. And the women were the leaders. But even back in first grade, get this, 2 first grades, 65 kids in each class.
What?
Abs and 1 nun. 8th grade, 2 eighth grades, 65 kids in each class. And I was one of the kids that was sent out in the hall to help the kids who couldn't read as well or couldn't do math as well. 2-3 days a week in first and second grade, I was out in the hall with these kids. They didn't want to be there. And frankly, I didn't want to be there either. But that's how they handled 65 kids in a class. They had kids who knew something. So early on, I was picked to be one of those. And I think that gave me amazing confidence. It also made me very nervous about responsibility and not letting people down, because if they didn't do well on the test, I had failed them. But I don't think I didn't know of it as confidence then, but it clearly must have been a confidence builder.
Oh, I would think. And I looked at your background as a teacher. You were a third grade teacher.
That's what I always wanted to do until I realized there was business too.
Yeah, I love it. You know what's funny? So you know this, I was a teacher the first 8 years of my career. And when I was in college, I was like debating, do I go become a teacher? I actually became a business major for a week and a half. And then I went back to teaching. In retrospect, I wish I would have stuck with it because I ended up here anyway. Kathy says, that sounds like Saint Sebastian. People taught by nuns are resilient.
Right. Well, and the other thing about school teachers, and you know this, Jason, and it helped me I have a master's degree in child guidance, which I used much more in business than I ever used in teaching. And teachers have to think on their feet. You got 35 third graders in front of you, or that was my class, not 65, but 35. You have to be thinking on your feet constantly. And it helps you later in life be a much better manager, I think.
Heck yes. I think it helps with management and even sales. I don't think of myself as much of a sales. Like, I'm not great at sales. I'm great at conveying a message, conveying a story, teaching you, right, how something works or why this is an advantage. Who is this? This is, I think, your friend Maureen. How long have you been a professional stand-up paddleboarder with your dog on the board? Louise, what do we need to know here?
Oh, Maureen. Maureen came and visited me at my place in Wisconsin. And every morning, my exercise is to get up on the paddleboard with my dog and go across the lake and back. And I was going to show Maureen how to do it. She was like, I've never done it before. And in 1 nanosecond, she was ahead of me. So who's the professional stand-up paddleboarder?
Maureen's a quick learner. That's awesome. What a great workout, I would think, and a great way to start your day. Being on water, you're with your dog, you're moving your body.
It is.
That's awesome. Who is this? This is Tina. Culture is so important. Having the right people in front in positions is so important, but this is understanding. Learning people, creating the right culture takes time. It's great that you learn the importance of it and you implement it at Prime. Heck yes. Maureen's disagreeing, but you guys can fight that out at some point. That's funny. I love it. When you're no different than anyone else. We're all human. We all wake up sometimes and we feel down, or there's moments we feel discouraged. When you find yourself in those moments, do you have certain things that you do to pick yourself back up, to put yourself in a different state of mind?
I'm very good at compartmentalization. And when I'm down, typically, if it's something that I can't control, I'm very good at putting it behind me, putting it in a box, locking it up, and not worrying about it. I'm so good at that there have been situations, business situations, where I will tell my staff, hey, so-and-so's coming in and we're going to meet with them and we're going to talk about such and such. And my staff will go, what? You don't like that person at all. Remember what he did to us back in? And I am honestly like, he did? Because I'm so good. I forget bad things.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy? I mean, it sounds silly and naive, but it is true. My children know it. My teams knew it. And it helps me not to be so down because I'm good at locking it in a box and sticking it away.
I think that is an incredible gift on so many levels, because it's easy to close ourselves off from people and opportunities if we've had a bad experience in the past.
Right.
So we almost lock ourselves off from future opportunities.
Right.
It's easy. I think to some degree, the ability to which we're able to forgive others, we're also able to forgive ourselves. So I think that's really special. And I love that. The other thing I think is, I mean, I'm a ruminator, and sometimes I hold on to that worry. And one of the things that years ago, someone told me, they were like, okay, if you're going to worry for like a month about the same thing, what if we gave you time frames? You can worry about it for 15 minutes, set it on your phone, on your calendar, and then if you can worry for 15 minutes as much as you want, and then close it off. I love that you have that gift. Rob loves it too. I forget bad things. That's really beautiful. What a gift. It
is a gift. There's no question. But I think it's a gift that has to be used and fomented, and you got to get good at it. You got to help yourself get good at it.
I would, like anything, you flex, you learn how to do it. You lift weights, you grow that muscle, you grow that skill.
Yes.
Okay, so you started Prime Advantage, which was a unique kind of buying group. You left growing, and I assume, I don't know how this started, so I'm excited to hear. But something starts as an idea, almost always, and you turn it into something. So for all the entrepreneurs listening, what was that like, having this idea? Maybe you woke up at 2 a.m. I don't know. I'm excited to hear, and to turn it into something that was real.
Well, here's how it started. And it was really two veins that combined together. Dover had 44 companies. The presidents got together every 2 years, not very often. And when we would be together, we were all industrial manufacturers of different kinds of products. We would all say, too bad Dover doesn't help us in purchasing. Wouldn't it be great if we could pool our purchasing power, use our muscle? We all buy metal, we all buy motors, we all buy circuit boards, etc. We would all go back to our respective jobs thinking, what a great idea. I hope somebody's working on it, because I don't have time to work on it. And Dover had 20 people, as I said, on the corporate staff, 10 doing M&A and 10 doing finance. So they didn't, now they have a huge purchasing, but back then they didn't. So that was always in the back of my mind. But also, Groen was a supplier to a number of dealer buying groups. And we would have, example being IFED, all the manufacturers would get together and meet with the Walter Simon and Denny Horowitz and those guys who were running IFED at the time, Henry Singer, etc. And while we were waiting for them to come in, we would all say to each other, why don't we have a buying group? They've got a buying group. We're writing the rebate checks. Wouldn't it be nice to get a rebate check? So 1997 comes along, and Dover has put in, at that point, another level of management, and decides that the presidents should all live where their main manufacturing facilities are. And I'm living in Chicago, and mine is in Jackson, Mississippi. And I think maybe this is time. It's 22 years I've been here. I would love to work for myself. And so I asked a number of Dover presidents and a number of food service equipment presidents, listen, remember what we used to talk about? If I started that, would you, one, join us? And two, most importantly, would you share who your best suppliers are? Because it's got to be equal balance. The members have to be as happy as the suppliers, and vice versa. And so we started with 13 manufacturers, 6 of whom were Dover companies, none in food service other than Randell, and the others not, and 6 suppliers. So there were 13 visionary members, 6 brave suppliers. And then 20 years later, when we sold it, we had about 2,000 buying members and approximately 135 suppliers.
Wow. Did you, how much, was that the most, when you started your own thing, you'd been a president of a big corporation, a big company. Had you ever put in more work than when you were starting Prime Advantage?
Never. And I have to say, my people would say to me, what do you need to be an entrepreneur? And I would say, a lot of nightgowns, because you got to get up in the middle of the night and change them. You're sweating so much thinking about business.
That's a great answer. I've never thought of that, but I can relate to that. Wow, what a cool story. Thanks for sharing that. Today you speak and you consult with companies, and a lot of it is about culture. What do you, when people hire you and they bring you in to talk about culture, and I mean, so many of the things we've talked about here are probably hiring well, all the things you learned at Prime Advantage. What do you hope that they get, that the companies that bring you in, what do you want to leave them with?
I really want them to understand what will make their young team members flourish. Their middle managers, their first level employees, and I want them to understand their own culture so they know what will make them flourish. You would be amazed, Jason, or I was, I guess, at how many companies where you have the management team or the CEO that thinks the culture is one thing, and then you spend time with the employees and it's nothing like they think it is. And the disconnect is sometimes enormous, it's unintentional, and it's a crime. But a lot of them don't even know it. At least I'm grateful they bring me in. I hope that when I leave, they recognize what their culture is. And culture, I mean, it's a fancy word for the value system of the company, the rituals, the rights of the company. Who are the storytellers? Who are the heroes? I went into one company. This is a bad story, but it will shock you. One of the middle managers, really respected person. He was like one of the heroes of the company, been there a long time, was sitting in a room training reps. And I was in the back of the room. Halfway through the discussion, he said, now listen, engineering is going to tell you one thing, but don't listen to them. Listen to me. I'll tell you what's right. And I thought, holy mackerel, this is a celebrated hero in the company. Clearly, management didn't know what he was saying. And clearly, there was a disconnect that he felt comfortable saying it, even in front of me, an outsider, between the departments. So it's just every company has great functioning and a little bit of dysfunctioning. No company doesn't. It's like families. But if you understand culture, your own, and it comes from the top, from a value system that the employees understand and relate to, it makes all the difference in the world. So a lot of what I do is discovery in the beginning, and then helping to make sure that the communication of the goals and the objectives and the values that come from the top get all the way through so everybody knows where they fit. Because the other part, and a lot of my consulting is helping women flourish in these companies. A lot of times the management didn't recognize that it's not the glass ceiling. It's not the women who aren't getting vice president's jobs. It's the women on the first rung of the ladder who are not getting moved up to the second rung for whatever reason, unconscious bias, family issues, whatever it is. That's where it has to start. That's where young people have to be going from the first rung to the second rung. I'm not saying it's easy to get to be a vice president, but it's much easier to have a diverse culture and a diverse workforce if you're also working on those lower levels, especially for the women and people of color in the company.
Heck yes. And I love that you focus on values. Someone told me one time, oftentimes we focus so much on what we believe in life, but oftentimes people believe very different things. And someone described it to me this way. She said, if you bring, let's take a nun or a priest and a rabbi together, they have different beliefs. But if you ask them what they value love collectively, they value connection. The values are the same. So when you focus on values in an organization, it's something that virtually everyone can relate to.
Absolutely.
So I love that that's where you focus. Kathy says the perception gap between CEOs and frontline workers is the difference between the desired culture and the actual culture. Wanting good culture is not the same as having good culture. Kathy, really well said. And I don't know what the difference is, because when I was a rep, I'm on the manufacturer side now. When I was a rep, I worked, we would have 20, 25 manufacturers we represented, and the regional would come in and talk to me, and I'd hear the truth about what the vibe was. But you're right. The CEOs oftentimes didn't realize, they didn't understand what was happening, or the perception people had of them, or the affect they had on those below them. So I think it's great that you go in and you help them recognize. Do you ever have to tell CEOs, hey, listen, the challenge is coming from you and it's hard for them to receive?
Oh, I have to tell CEOs a lot worse than that. But this is one of the things I think I've turned into my mother. You get to a certain age, I'm 75, and you say what you want to say. So, I think I used to be worried about that. And now I say, you're hiring me for this. You're going to hear it, and kick me out if you don't want to hear it, but you're going to hear it.
I love it. You just speak it like it is.
Yes.
Oh, Louise, this is so great. Okay. We might go a couple minutes over. There's a couple more questions I want to ask you. Any personal challenge is the thing that teaches us what we're made of. It's in walking through the hard stuff that we realize we're capable of more than we probably realized. How about for you, a professional and or a personal challenge that you had to walk through that really taught you, you know what, I'm capable of carrying a heavy load here. I can do this.
Well, I go all the way back to my early management days at Groen. I had been there as a part-time advertising writer, and the Eastern sales manager job came up. And when it did, I had at the same time gotten offered my dream teaching job, which was kindergarten. I always wanted to teach kindergarten. A friend became a principal. And so he asked me, so I went in to talk to my boss. I said, I've loved it here. I've loved the opportunities you've given me. I've loved the travel. This is my dream job. I don't know what's next for me in the business world. And I said, I have a master's degree in child guidance. If I'm going to stay in business, I need to get an MBA somewhere. Rosary College has a master's in business for non-business majors. That was another Catholic school in my town. I said, I think maybe if I stay in business, I should go there. And he said, listen, I have a lot of faith in you. I think you're very smart. You could be president of this company one day. And I thought, holy mackerel. I didn't know he told everybody that. I thought, oh, wow, he's got to see something in me and business. I don't know. But then he did say, if you're serious, we'll send you to the University of Chicago and to get an MBA at the executive program, which he had gone to many years before. So he did believe in me. So I look up the requirements for the University of Chicago. And in order to get into the executive program, you have to have been a manager for 8 to 10 years. You have to have managed a certain number of people, and you have to have a certain salary. I had none of those. So talk about imposter syndrome. This was the true imposter syndrome. But I went for the interview. They liked the fact that I had been a teacher, and one of them said, you said you don't have 8 to 10 years of management. You managed a classroom. That's enough for me. So I get into the University of Chicago, and now we're taking these classes. I mean, my major in college was education and psychology, and now we're taking business classes and strategy. And oh my gosh, I could not sit low enough in the seat the first week on campus to hope I didn't get called on. And it was a huge challenge. It was a huge, do I really belong here? And am I going to be able to make it? But one step at a time. It's how you do anything, right? Or biting the elephant, or all the cliches. I was able to graduate from the executive program, meet so many amazing people, learned as much in my study groups as I did in the classes. And that was the thing, I think, that got me like, well, boy, that was tough. And you did it. And so my boss had faith in me. That was probably the biggest. I had to do it. I couldn't disappoint him. He was an alumni. So.
Wow, way to go. That's an awesome story. You did it. Charlie, this needs to be a 2-part session. We've got so much to learn from Louise. She's got too much wisdom and too many great stories to squeeze into 60 puny minutes. There's a lot of people. Louise, if you ever want to come back, you're in, just so you know. There's a whole lot of people that love hearing from you. And I totally agree. I'm up for this ever again if you want to do it, by the way. How do you define success? What does success mean to you?
Well, the story of follow your bliss, the idea that if you are living, is it Robert Campbell? If you're living the life you should be living, you will be living a blissful life, because happiness and success are not the same thing. You could be happy and not successful. You could be successful and not happy. But if you follow your bliss and you're living your life that you ought to be living, meaning achieving your goals, that's success to me.
I think, I'm sure everyone defines it differently, but I think for me, at the core of it, at the end of the day, most people would say the same thing. Most people want to be happy. And at the end of their days, will look back and wish that that is what they'd accomplished. So I love your definition.
Joseph Campbell. I remember, it's Joseph Campbell.
Joseph Campbell. Okay, I'm going to look it up. I hadn't heard that quote.
Yes, in fact, he's got a series many years ago, a PBS series about Follow Your Bliss, being both successful and happy.
What a great answer. And I think I would say to anybody watching, follow your joy. Go where you love it. This is our friend Mary. Wow, that is so good. Mary's my colleague who lives in Chicago too. Okay. What is you focus on? There's other questions. Maybe we'll get you on again. I hope so. But your emphasis on your website is obviously culture, and particularly on emphasizing growth of women in organizations.
Right.
What's the most important piece of advice that you give to younger women coming up in the industry?
I think it's two things. Number one, stop apologizing. Women say, I'm sorry, more than men by a long shot. And it's just a part of our vocabulary. You know, we're conditioned. Women at an early age are conditioned to question their value, to not be sure that they fit, to not be sure that they should take on this role. There's a funny cartoon of a group of men sitting at a table raising their hands, and there's one woman, and she's sitting there looking down like this. What she's doing is thinking, now wait a minute, should I volunteer for this? Am I capable to do this? And all, anyhow. So I say, stop apologizing, be direct. That's the first piece of advice. And then the second piece of advice is be the very best listener that you can be, no matter what. It's a skill we all possess. I think women have it a little bit more than others, and it can make all the difference in your world.
Oh, I love it. I think listening, if for people who intentionally choose to cultivate that skill, everyone loves to be heard. Everyone loves to tell their story they love. So if you can listen and the person that's telling their story knows that you care, it's easy to endear yourself to them, to build that relationship, build trust really easily. So really great advice. We're going to do something here. Stop apologizing. Who's this? Oh, Yarabelle. Love it. Marsha's loving it. So good. David, inspiring conversation. David, thank you for joining us. Okay, Louise, a couple things. There are so many people. I was talking to my dad today. You know my dad. My dad, for those who don't know, my dad, Larry, was your rep back in the, late 80s, I guess, early 90s.
Yes.
And back when I was cleaning combis and brazing pans, everything. And he made a comment. I said, tell me, what was Louise like to work with and work for? And one of the things he said, first, all the reps loved to work with Louise. That you always presented yourself in a really calm manner, and you earned their trust and respect. That was something that just came to you. The other thing he said was that he noticed about you was there almost like there was a trail of other industry leaders who followed in your path, people that had worked under you, who you trained and you mentored and worked with, who are today, like today's industry leaders. And I think we joke that you were like the Andy Reid of food service. So many coaches who coach Andy Reid in Kansas City who go on to be coaches elsewhere, and you are kind of like that. So, know that I think that's a part of how you're seen. And I'm sure there are so many other people that we owe debts of gratitude to who have led, my generation, who learned from you. So
thank you. I
think it's beautiful.
Thank you, Larry.
Heck yeah. Now, I reached out to a couple other friends just to say, tell me what Louise means to you. I like to end on just positive affirmations and lifting people up. Deirdre Flynn, Louise was before her time as the first woman elected a president of NAFEM at a time when it really was an old boys club. Louise is talented beyond belief. When she started Prime Advantage, nothing like this had even existed. She was always ahead of her time. She was the driving force behind why we have the CFSP program. And so many in our industry are better professionals and confident in their craft. She is so sweet, funny, nice, a teacher, a mentor, unbelievable as a person. It's hard to describe in words just how fabulous she is.
That's so sweet.
You are loved. And our buddy Rob Connolly, Louise is a superstar, not a star, a superstar. She has and continues to have an enormous impact on the industry and its individuals. Her accomplishments are too many to list, as they happen because she is smart. She sees the opportunity, not the barriers. She is creative, persistent, pragmatic, and focuses on the goal, not the noise in the way. I think we talked earlier about how you can compartmentalize the noise, the worry. And with all of that, she is a genuine and caring person, a champion of people. Oh, and by the way, her span of involvement, deep engagement, and dedication to the industry is amazing. Louise is a giant in our industry and would have been a giant in any industry she chose. I know this sounds like hyperbole, but it's not. If you know Louise, you know, and if you don't, you need to make that happen. I have deep respect and admiration for Louise. It's my privilege to know and work with her. She is a hero to me and is the best in every way. I end where I started. Louise is a superstar.
Oh my goodness. That's just so wonderful. Thank you.
Oh, you have so many fans. And there are so many tonight. I don't think I've ever seen so many inspiring conversation comments. Who else is this? This is, let's just see. This is, Yarabel listening. I love this interview. Thank you, Louise. Yarabel, thanks for joining us. This is Maureen. This has been a wonderful hour listening to Louise and Jason. Maureen, thanks for joining us. Kevin, Louise has been a great friend and a business partner to Ron Coachman and KCL. Thank you, Louise. One of the most, who's this? Let's just see. Mike Orlando, one of the most engaging persons I know. Mike, love the comment. Thank you. This is my bride. Such a great interview. You have inspired people in my home tonight, Louise. I love it. Who's this? This is my colleague, Mary Margaret Dunn. Oh my God, I could cry. This has made me, I'm going to get emotional. This is just what happens, Louise. I don't know. This has made me even more inspired to be the best woman I can be while continuing to grow in this industry. Thank you for everything tonight. Mary, love it. Deirdre, she is so wonderful. And those of us who have had the great fortune to work with her, for her, and learn from her, we are the lucky ones. I'm not alone in saying I love this woman. Bring out the Kleenex, Louise. Bring it. No shame. This is great. Charlie, one of the best hours I've spent in the last year. Heck yes. Louise, from all of us, a great, great big thank you for giving us an hour and 6 minutes. And for, 50 or so years, however much it's been, of mentoring and training and teaching and loving everything you've done.
Well, Jason, thank you for the fantastic questions, the coaching beforehand, keeping my nerves down and my confidence up. You are amazing to do that, and I appreciate it so much.
It has been a gift. Everyone, thank you for joining Louise and I. You're always welcome to post more questions in the group if you'd like to find out anything else. Marsha had asked, I think it was Marsha or someone, I'll go find the quote and I'll post it in the group, the quote that Louise was mentioning about bliss, following your bliss and success being that. So I'll go find it. We'll post in the group for all to have. Maybe we'll even make it, well, I should do that. I'll make it tomorrow's quote card. I'll go find it. That's going to be the quote card in the morning for everybody. And to everyone listening, Louise and I talked about earlier, story to me is the most powerful gift in terms of inspiring and motivating to create emotion. It creates real emotion to see that someone's accomplished something big and to know that, wow, they accomplished something big. So can I. So let these stories, think about them, dwell on them. If you took some notes, reread them again, you can accomplish big things. There was someone that believed in Louise along the way that said, help her get her MBA and said, you could be the president someday. And the truth is that we could all receive that piece of wisdom. We're all talented and gifted beyond our measure. We have no idea the strength and capabilities we have until people start speaking it into us and we start pushing those boundaries and taking those risks and accomplishing, your MBA as you're trying to lead all these things that she did. We're all capable of it. So let that be your inspiration. Wishing everyone the best. Thank you for joining us. Lots of love, everybody. Louise, thanks again.
Thank you. Thank you all so much.
You got it. We will see everybody next week. Have a good night, everybody. Bye-bye.